Good morning, my family and my friends and my adversaries. Um, I want to thank you to all the people that like my intro, and I have to thank Karen Stever on that. And you can check out her music, which is she's like the most creative person I know. She does art. She can play any instrument pretty much. I mean, she does it all. And she works with Frank Greiner, who is Rob Zombie's producer, and I've worked with both of them on a project, and been friends with her for a long time, and Frank. So yeah, go check her out, KarenStever.com, and she's got merchandise there too. Also, this video, some mind blowing. You just sometimes you just bring up your YouTube, and I usually bring it up on my Xbox, so it's on TV on a TV screen. And the algorithms say when you're into so much crime, you get all these little channels, with not many views and such. And I always look for those channels because they usually have really good content, and or at least a lot of times they do. And so I ran across this one, and this is mind blowing. If you like the case, if it don't, or if, just in life in general, it's a very important information to know, and this needs to get out there. Not just because of this case, which it can relate to, and does in some things here. This is kind of a long video, so I don't want to talk too much here because we're gonna be stopping it here and there. I'm gonna try to let it play out because the information is there. Um, so I don't really need to say much, but I got to tell you, you have to blow up your screen. Do it right now. Blow it up because you're gonna have to do a little bit of reading, and I'm telling you, it's worth it. But this is going to be an hour-long video. If I don't get tired and make two installments or something, um, because I'm doing this here. It's 3:16 a.m. and I just not too long ago we got up at Rory's channel there doing a live on that, and you can go check that out too. I'll leave a link down below, and I'll leave a link, of course, to the reference on this video. Which came from, I think it's called Idaho 4 Revealed or something like that. Anyway, very important. I get this out there. Um, I'm going to do that right now. But like I said, bring up, blow up your screens if you can. I'll blow it up on this end.
Now, to move forward with its case, Coburger's defense says it needs more discovery, or what they plan to use as evidence in a trial, from the state.
Your Honor, first, I want to start with talking about the discovery process. As the court knows, we have been representing Mr. Coburger since the very end of December of 2022. And during the course of the last several months, there has been a lot of discovery that's been requested and a lot that's been supplied. I come here asking the court to compel discovery. I'm seeking an order directing that we receive this discovery. I'm not seeking any other kind of sanction. I don't come here saying that the prosecutor has done something wrong. I come here saying that there are things that we have a disagreement about whether I should get them or when I should get them, and we seek a court order to assist us in this regard.
This is all true and factual stuff, people. If you've never heard of a dirt box, this is all true stuff.
Miller argues her team is making, quote, extraordinary efforts to find information in the case, but still needs more information from the state, including training records for 3 officers involved in the murder investigation.
We have not asked for training records for every officer that has had anything to do with the case. I would not want to stand here and let the court think that this is an exhaustive list of the officers that we might need training records for. But these are 3 officers that we've requested them for, and the state has indicated they're not willing to give us the training records. These 3 officers are officers that have each conducted critical interviews with critical witnesses in the case, made decisions about the interviews, made decisions about evidence, and conducted other kinds of investigations. We seek their training records to understand their processes. The training records, Your Honor, they are records that we've been able to obtain from various police agencies in the past. In this circumstance, are not records that I could find on my own.
Defense attorney Taylor says in past cases, she's received similar police records. But prosecutor Ashley Jennings counters Taylor's argument, saying the requested reports are not necessary for the defense's case.
With regard to item number 6 on the defendant's first motion to compel discovery, this involves training records of a couple of officers. Again, these are officers who the state would argue are not material to the case. They've interviewed other witnesses. They wouldn't even be called by the state to testify at trial. And the state objects to this because training records of specified officers aren't included within Rule 16. And they haven't proffered any reason as to why this would be needed for the preparation of their case. Again, these are investigators who have gone out and just interviewed some witnesses within the case.
Jennings argues the number of law enforcement officers involved in the case could make a request like this difficult.
But I would just remind the court that several hundred investigators have been involved in this case. Our concern with allowing training records for these few, which we can't understand why there's a substantial need for these particular ones, wouldn't open the door to us then having to go and obtain training records for these hundreds of investigating officers who've been involved, some of which are outside of our control.
But Taylor doubles down, saying the defense may call the 3 officers as witnesses.
I want to hear a little bit more on the police training records. I am aware that over 120 officers were involved in the investigation in this case. I am not asking for all 120 officers. I will tell the court that likely there are other officers' training records that I would want. This is within Idaho Criminal Rule 16. These are records, documents, and objects that may have information relevant to Mr. Coburger's investigation and defense. These are records that are likely of witnesses. Whether or not the state calls them, they are likely to be witnesses.
Taylor points out the officers were involved in the early stages of the investigation, including the search for a white Hyundai Elantra.
Said earlier, we are confident that the occupant or occupants of that vehicle have information that's critical to this investigation.
Before a suspect was named in the case, the Moscow Police Department announced they were searching for a white Hyundai Elantra, naming it a vehicle of interest. When investigators executed a search warrant at Coburger's parents' home, they received multiple items from his white Hyundai Elantra, including goggles, hiking boots, a shovel, and a wrench. The Elantra is also involved in defense attorney Taylor's second motion to compel, requesting FBI records.
And that has to do with the FBI forensic examiner that told the state to look for a white Hyundai Elantra. This is the examiner that originally there were certain years looked for, and that year range was expanded. I believe I have the communications between the police department and the FBI about how that date range changed, but what I don't have is the report from the examiner.
Taylor says the same FBI report relates to Coburger's cell phone records. She says her team needs that information to avoid a due process violation for their client.
As the court is aware, the state has a duty to provide discovery to the defense. As the court is aware that not producing discovery, especially when it's material, can be a due process violation. And as the court is aware, the state has filed its notice of intent to seek death against Mr. Coburger. These are critical, relevant materials, all of them, including the police training records. They're necessary for us to prepare and present our defense of Mr. Coburger. They're necessary for us to do our investigation. They're necessary for us to prepare our case and our motion package moving forward. These are things that we need to have.
28-year-old Coburger is charged in the quadruple murder that shocked the nation when 4 University of Idaho students were found stabbed to death in their off-campus home last November. For weeks, no persons of interest or suspects were named. But in late December, Coburger was arrested at his parents' home more than 2,000 miles away from the crime scene in Pennsylvania.
On the record, this is State of Idaho versus Brian Coburger.
Accused murderer Brian Coburger is back in court for the first time since prosecutors announced they'll seek the death penalty in his case.
There is a heightened standard now that the state has filed its notice of intent to seek death, and these are very relevant, critical bits of information.
Coburger's defense now requesting what they say is crucial information as his October trial date looms closer.
Mr. Coburger's team works nonstop, and when we ask for discovery, it's because we have reason to believe it exists. So I wanted the court of counsel to be aware it's not a fishing expedition. These are real items that are really necessary to investigate this case and prepare Mr. Coburger's defense.
Coburger's defense, headed by attorney Ann Taylor, argues the state has key information it has yet to turn over to the defense. Taylor says this information is vital to prepare a defense case for Coburger.
So with that as the background and the frequent communication with the prosecutor's office to try to obtain the materials we need, we have come to an impasse in a few areas, and that's what brings us to court today.
This stuff is just, it's mind-blowing, and it gets better. And it's starting to make me realize what's really going on in the court. Or at least it very well could be.
Last week marked Bill Thompson's 30th anniversary as prosecutor here. He's led the fight for justice in other high-profile cases. But he admits nothing like this. The gruesome murders of 4 college students, and now 5 days without a suspect.
Moscow Police Department with the state police and the FBI have brought in probably more resources than I've ever seen in an investigation in 30 years here in Latah County to try to answer those questions.
I like their music.
With most people in the country right now focusing their attention on the results of the midterm elections, and rightfully so, well, there's a quote I'd like to point out. I forgot exactly where I read it, but here was the basic gist. Quote, "If we elect Democrats, we'll be a socialist country in 10 years. But if we elect Republicans, it'll probably take 15 years. Now, that was, of course, a joke. However, there is some truth to it, because it seems like regardless of which party is in power, our country appears to be slowly, incrementally stripping citizens of their basic fundamental rights. Now, you might say, hold on, Roman, what exactly are you even talking about? We have rights.
I'm not much into politics and stuff like that, or try not to be. And this channel doesn't get into that. So anything, quotes and that kind of stuff, just know that I'm neutral in all this.
Enshrined in the Bill of Rights, which is part of the U.S. Constitution, the highest law of the land. And I would say that's true. However, over the past 230 odd years, those rights have slowly been eroded away. Now, on this program, we've already spoken of many different examples. The right to freedom of speech, for example, is being attacked by what appears to be blatant collusion between social media companies and the government. The right to keep and bear arms is treated like a privilege in some places, a privilege that can be taken away on a dime. But today, in today's episode, I'd like to focus on a different right that's being encroached upon, a right that you and me, people in general, typically take for granted, the Fourth Amendment, the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. Because you see, unbeknownst to most people, the US government has been, for years now, using a piece of technology called a Stingray device to collect massive amounts of data on US citizens without any search warrants. And if you think that's bad, well, it's likely going to get worse. Because just last month, Joe Biden, very quietly, without much fanfare and without almost any media reporting on it, he revoked part of something called the Presidential Policy Directive number 28, making it even easier for the government to spy on American citizens. However, let me back up for a moment and set the stage for you properly here in order to make sense of all these different developments. If you're like most people, then you likely have your phone next to you all day long. In fact, you might be watching this video on your phone right now. But while a cell phone provides many conveniences, it's also, at the same time, essentially a tracking device. As an example of what I mean by that, if you happen to subscribe to, let's say, AT&T, well, you will not receive any phone calls or any text messages unless AT&T can locate your phone, which is a process that's accomplished, at least in part, by the use of cell phone towers. Because the network, meaning AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and all the rest of them, they are always checking to see which cell phone tower their subscribers are closest to. And if, let's say, you happen to be moving around and your cell phone is no longer within the reach of the last tower that it previously connected to, then the search radius expands outward towards other cell phone towers within that same tracking area. Essentially, what this means in practice is that your phone is always looking to find the nearest cell phone tower, while at the same time, the nearest cell phone tower is always looking to find your phone. That's a bit of an oversimplified way of explaining it, but that's generally how it works. However, this is where things, you can say, get a little tricky, because this right here is what's known as a cell site simulator. Specifically, this is a very popular model of this device with the brand name Stingray. It's the brand that's most widely used by US intelligence agencies. And what the Stingray does is that it masquerades itself as a cell phone tower. Essentially, the Stingray exploits the technical process by which a phone communicates with a tower by pretending to be a tower. The way that it works is that the moment a Stingray device is deployed into a given area, it begins acting as a tower, and it begins transmitting a radio signal that's slightly more powerful than the actual cell phone tower within the area. The result is that the cell phones within the range of the Stingray, they drop their connections to the legitimate cell phone towers, and instead, the cell phones connect themselves to the Stingray device. And once the cell phones are connected to the Stingray, multiple consequences start taking effect one after the other. First of all, the cell phones lose their ability to either send or to receive phone calls, text messages, or any other forms of communication.
Right.
It's one thing that happens. The other thing that happens is that the person who's using the Stingray device, they can then gain access to a treasure trove of data, including your phone number, the details of who you've been calling and who you've been texting, the details of who's been calling you and who's been texting you, what websites you've been visiting, which cell phone towers you've recently pinged, meaning where you've been traveling to recently, and then they can even drain your phone's battery by overloading it with requests for signal.
Yeah.
And furthermore, these Stingrays, they don't have to be stationary. In fact, the way that the US government uses them is very often by mounting them into a vehicle, a low-flying airplane or a drone, or even in a person's backpack.
Backpack. Interesting. Very interesting.
And so if you've ever wanted a visual representation of Big Brother government, well, a drone that's flying around the sky with a Stingray device attached to it, scanning the area for your whereabouts, well, that pretty much fits the bill. Now, initially, when these devices were first created, they were made with military purposes in mind because of their ability to block incoming cell phone signals. However, like everything else in the government that has to do with fighting terrorism, the use of this device has morphed into something well beyond what it was initially meant to do. And you fast forward 20 years, and these Stingray devices are found all throughout the government. In fact, according to a congressional report that was released back in the year 2016, the Justice Department, as well as the Department of Homeland Security, they have together spent at least $95 million on more than 430 Stingrays just between the years of 2010 and 2014. Think about that. In just 4 years, just these two departments have purchased at least 430 Stingrays. But it's, of course, not just the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. According to an investigation that was conducted by the ACLU, there are at least 73 agencies across 25 different states that use Stingrays to spy on unsuspecting American citizens. Although it's worth mentioning that in that same report, they also admitted that the real number of agencies which use Stingrays is likely much higher, given the fact that the government is extremely secretive about their use and extremely reluctant to even acknowledge that they're being purchased. Regardless, though, here are a few of the agencies at the federal level that own Stingray devices. You have the FBI, the DEA, the U.S. Marshal Service, you have even the IRS, the NSA, among many other agencies. And that's, again, all at just the federal level. At the different local levels, the different municipalities have likewise gotten into the action as well. That's because the Department of Homeland Security, they allow local law enforcement agencies, like your local state and county police departments, to buy Stingray devices using terrorism prevention grants. Meaning, local municipalities receive anti-terrorism grants that they are allowed to use to purchase Stingrays. And with the current campaign to combat domestic terrorism and the big push to label anyone, including concerned parents, as domestic terrorists, well, it really makes you wonder what these Stingrays are really being used for. Now, the big question that you are likely wondering at this point is whether this is legal or not. How can the government be spying on us without going through the courts and getting a warrant based on probable cause? Is this actually legal?
Okay. I want you to read that right there. Must be trained and supervised appropriately. Cell site simulators may be operated only by trained personnel who have been authorized by their agency to use the technology and whose training has been administered by a qualified agency component or expert. What is Ann Taylor asking for? Training records. Isn't that strange? I'll keep going.
But regardless of all the different technicalities, let's step out of the weeds for a moment and take a quick moment to refresh our memory about what the Fourth Amendment actually says. Here it is, quote, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." And so, because of the plain and unambiguous language of this right, civil rights groups have made the argument that these Stingray devices, when used by the government, violate the Fourth Amendment. And surprisingly, the group fighting back strongest against all of this is the ACLU. They have been making the argument for years now that capturing the private phone data from American citizens, especially from phones which are often used in the privacy of a person's home, does in fact constitute the definition of a search as described in the Fourth Amendment. And according to them, capturing this data through the warrantless use of stingrays clearly does not meet the standard of, quote, probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Furthermore, besides violating just the Fourth Amendment, the ACLU has also argued that the use of these Stingray devices is illegal because it interferes with communication signals, which is something that's actually prohibited under the Federal Communications Act. And of course, the ACLU further pointed out that it's not only the government and the police that can use this technology. Here's, for instance, what Mr. Christopher Sogian, the chief technologist at the ACLU, said on this particular matter. Quote, "Our government is sitting on a security flaw that impacts every phone in the country. If we don't talk about Stingray-style tools and the flaws that they exploit, we can't defend ourselves against foreign governments and criminals using this equipment too." Meaning that since the government wants to continue using these devices, well, there's no political will to properly regulate them, making it possible for criminals to be able to use them as well. But again, to fight back against this particular problem, the ACLU appears to really be doing the heavy lifting here. In fact, they conducted their own investigation into the use of stingrays and used that investigation to create a document. You can see it up on screen for yourself, which lists a number of recommendations for the federal government. And included in this document is a slew of serious accusations against the federal government in the way that they've been using stingrays up until now. As just one example, the ACLU wrote in this investigation report that on the rare occasions when the police actually went to seek proper authorization to use the Stingray device, meaning when they actually went to a judge to get a search warrant, they have, on numerous occasions, withheld information from the judges who issue warrants about the full scope and capabilities of the device, including what it collects, as well as the real number of innocent people who are likely to be impacted in the dragnet.
I want you to pay attention to this right here too. I never even thought of this.
I mean, what do we even present tomorrow? Honestly, anyone?
Why do we have to present at all?
What's that supposed to mean?
Well, if we're going to fail and be humiliated, why do it on stage in front of 1,000 people in a live streamed audience?
Yeah.
Are you saying we shouldn't even show up?
No offense, but it's basically going to be a public execution.
Yes, and public executions are very popular. It's show business. We are not quitting, Richard.
Look, or like, I want to present. I do. It's just, I don't know.
Jesus, are you okay?
And what? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, all good. They let me go.
Who let you go?
When was the last time you slept, Jared?
Yeah, absolutely, David. What are we talking about, gents?
We're talking about how I didn't get to present in the prelims because I was too busy getting my face pummeled so that our team could move forward. That's why we're presenting tomorrow. And you know what? We're going to win. Yeah, we're going to win even if I have to go into the auditorium and personally jerk off every guy in the audience.
That's a lot of jerking. And we only have 10 minutes to present, so.
So, we're fucked, aren't we?
Yeah, even if he's jerking 2 at a time, there are what, 800 guys in that room, so that's 400 times whatever the mean jerk time is.
The what?
Mean jerk time. I mean, it doesn't matter, but hypothetically, time is equal to 400 total jerks at a 2-dick rate.
Unless Ehrlich jerks off 4 guys at a time, and then we can cut that in half.
How would he do 4 guys? He's got 2 hands, so that's 2 dicks at a time, right?
Look, you have 2 guys on either side with their dicks.
I don't know what that was. I didn't see that in there earlier.
Not knowing that in
Sorry
actuality,
about that.
the cell phones in a large area will be affected with a slew of information being collected from all of them. What this means in practice is that judges across the country are potentially authorizing the use of a technology that they know nothing about. Furthermore, this investigation answered a question that I've been wondering for quite a while now, which is, if these devices are so ubiquitous, if they are used quite literally all over the entire country, why don't we know more about them? Why aren't more people aware of their existence? And the answer appears to be that the federal government has gone out of its way to ensure that they remain secret. As an example of what I mean by that, this ACLU investigation found that on several occasions, the federal government actually forced states, as well as forced different localities, to sign non-disclosure agreements prohibiting them from releasing any information about these Stingray devices, even in a court of law, which is quite frankly an almost unprecedented step in terms of both secrecy as well as surveillance here domestically in the United States.
Idaho could have arrested Coburger at his Washington apartment as a fugitive who fled justice. Did the MPD and assisting law enforcement investigate Coburger in a manner consistent with constitutional affordances? Is the discovery that Ann Taylor is still waiting on subject to non-disclosure agreements between a manufacturer and agency? If so, then Thompson is in the hook for non-disclosure of Rule 16 discovery.
I worked for Geological Survey and went to Kansas. I couldn't stay there.
So, I don't know what all that stuff was in between there. God, that was awful. Anyway, what do you think about this information? Because it is pretty mind-blowing. And I didn't know this stuff. Government, and they're keeping it secret, you know, and even police agencies have these things, especially ones that are by like ports or, you know, close to a border. What can they do with it? You know, I want you to answer me. I'm not suggesting anything at all, but it does raise some suspicions in a few different areas. And what if this, you know, the worst scenario I would see is, let's say that Brian is guilty. Let's say that he's guilty, and they get off because these stupid knuckleheads use that thing, and they can prove it. That would be the worst case scenario, I think. And there's a question of framing. You know, that should be looked into a little bit more, I think, too, because man, there's so many possibilities. And people talk about the DNA. Well, let's touch DNA. That I'm telling you, that could have came from any place. Somebody could have jumped in his car. I mean, it could have came from anywhere. So I don't know, but I want your comments on what you think of this information here about these Stingray things and how they might play into this case, or if they don't at all, if that's your opinion. I want to know your opinions, and you can leave your comments down below. And I try to answer, you know, if I don't answer them right away, I mean, I try to answer all of them at some point in time. Yeah, so anyway, get out of this here. I want to thank, you know, all the new subscribers. You guys are blowing me away. You guys are awesome people, and I love all of you, man. You're just really awesome people, and I want to thank all those who watched my last video, the first part of my son's murder video. I want to thank you for the comments. God bless you all, and I hope you all have a great day, and you know, we shall see you next time around. Let me know in the comments, and of course I will leave some links down below too. So thank you again.